Hey everybody, welcome to yet another reset 20-minute lit yoga class. This class is focusing on ramp pose, as I like to call it in the lit yoga methodology. So in our reset classes, we often start class with this little low bridge that kind of looks like a ramp. We're going from one level to the next level as far as like that gradient of height goes, just like a ramp. I also find that when you're in that little low bridge, you're really working your glutes, you can really ramp up your energy. The thing we're really going to focus on today with our bridge is how we can use the gluteal activation in those bridges in order to engage the glutes and bring relief into the low back so that we can help define more of a neutral pelvis. So many of us work in seated jobs where we end up with this forward tip, this anterior tip of the pelvis, and this scrunched up tissue and musculature of the low back. And since we're sitting too, those glutes get really, really sleepy. So you can imagine low back muscles are all tight here, and they don't have the big, strong glutes to activate in order to lengthen them. So today, will hopefully help you find a little bit of relief if you do experience some tightness in the low back, whether it's frequent or just something that unfortunately comes to visit every now and then, and hopefully use these bridges and the principles we're going to go over today in order to find that relief through strength. So come down onto your back in order to get started here, and we'll find ourselves in a low ramp pose. Just getting our timer going. So as you come down onto your back, first off, check in, walk the feet in, make sure that with the feet walked in, and they don't have to be super close or anything. Have you ever heard that cue that you have to touch your heels with your fingertips? Well, for me, it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. Like everybody's arms are different lengths as well as their torsos and their legs. So that might not necessarily work for everyone or even like most of the population. So first, I just want your feet on the ground, not even close enough that you could touch them, but just plugged into the floor with a good, solid, healthy bend into the knees. Again, we're going to try to find space through the whole back chain of the body. Now, starting off here, first place I want you to bring your mind to is the pelvis. So feeling around the pelvis, you can take your hands on the two sides of the pelvic bowl here, these two big ilium bones. So right where your legs plug into those hip sockets, those iliums are going to be those two big outside ribs at the edges. Now you can trace that down and feel your sacrum, that bony fusion that also leads down to your tailbone. So the back of the pelvis here, the sacrum, we're going to feel that nice and grounded into the floor. You're still going to keep the natural curve of your low back. So I can kind of scoot my shirt up here for a moment just to show we do have this just natural curve of the low back, even though the sacrum's grounded. And so already this might feel like a lot of opening in the low back. Hey, that's great, go with it. Start to draw the belly in towards the back line of the body. So that's another one too, is when we start to wake the glutes up, the core is also going to start to wake up with it. They work together. They're synergist muscle groups. So when we squeeze the glutes or when we pull the core in, the other one fires a little bit more readily. So get a little exhale and just feel that natural drawing in of the belly button in towards the low back area. And then from here, bring your mind up to the shoulders. You're going to feel your shoulders connected into the ground. So you might really have some rounded forward shoulders. Just want you to comfortably bring where the arms are plugging into that shoulder socket down onto the floor. And you can even bring your arms down by your side to really help to snug those shoulder blades, the scapula, onto the back ribs. Now notice if even just getting those shoulders under you has really popped your ribs forward and really dramatized, made the arch of the low back a lot bigger. See if you can still kind of keep that rooting of your tailbone towards your heels, and again, that connection to the sacrum. So that's our first S, the sacrum. Our second S is the scapula, the shoulders back here at the back of the ribs that are connected. And then our third S is the skull. So you might have the chin lifted here, and that again, from a lot of our daily postures, can just sort of be the way the tissues and the muscles get set. But let's just bring a little length into the back of the neck if the chin is lifted by drawing that chin slightly in towards the chest here. So we're not restricting the throat or anything like that, but again, we're just allowing the natural length and our curve of the neck here to just exist. So we have our triple S here on the ground. This helps you check in with aligning the spine in a balanced way. When your skull, your scapula, and your shoulders here, and then the sacrum, the pelvis, are all aligned with each other. It's nice because we have the floor here to guide us and to help us feel that. So this is a good one to come into every day, just to feel a little bit of balance and alignment. But then again, the low back, it's not going to find any relief unless the muscles that also share attachments with it learn how to work and activate from a place of strength. So bring your palms onto the tops of the thighs, pretty close to where your leg bones here are plugging into those hip sockets. Where the palms are pressing here, I want you to just lightly traction your palms onto the thighs, like you're trying to push them up towards your knees. They won't really move much, but again, we're just allowing for a little bit of uncorking in this front area of the hip flexor. And then again, use an exhale to draw the belly in and start to squeeze your butt muscles. So really get the glutes tight here. Then, very small lift here. We're going to point the tailbone towards the heels, squeezing the butt muscles, pressing into the feet, and lifting into a very low bridge, our ramp pose. So ramp, because it not only emulates the shape of the ramp here, but also in this position, we're ramping up our energy. And so the glutes are working here. The hands are, again, helping to uncork the hips. Really, a lower bridge is much superior as far as activating your glutes than a higher bridge will be. So you can really feel that low back getting scrunchy and working for you. If you feel that, come a little bit lower, even if you're just hovering above the ground. Now from here, we're going to move our hands slightly down from the thighs onto the two bony frontal hip points. So again, just above where those legs plug into those hip sockets, you want to feel what's called your ASIS. It's just a shorthand for the anterior superior iliac spine. It's literally just like anatomical terminology telling you like where this bony landmark in the pelvis is. So don't worry about all that. Really just focus on your palms pressing into it and just giving you like the name in case you want to look it up later. So you're pressing your palms down into those two bony ASISs, little bony landmarks here, and use that to activate your glutes even more. So feel like you could push your hips up and into those palms. And then from here, I want you to take your hands and again, slide them around to the two iliums, the sides of that pelvic bowl. Here too, even though we have the hips lifted, we want to feel like we still have that good grounding that the floor gave us. So notice if your pelvis and your tailbone is kind of pointing down towards the ground, you want to, again, root that tailbone towards the heels, like really direct it towards the front of the mat. Feel the low back is lengthening. And it's not lengthening because we're pulling on it, it's lengthening because we're strengthening, again, muscles that share the same attachments as that low back. Sending this signal to the low back, you can relax a little bit here, bud, and I'm gonna work for you, nice and strong. So then actually, speaking of those glutes, now take your hands from these two iliums, this bowl of the pelvis where you're squeezing in and just getting this sense of the structure of the pelvis, and then slide your hands underneath your glutes. So you wanna be right at like the bottom of the butt flesh here, right at the cheek, right where the leg is meeting the back of the glutes. And so under here, you can take your fingers and literally like poke in to the very bottom of the butt flesh. You might get pretty close, you know, to the middle and everything, but hey, that's okay. You're just using your own hands to activate some musculature here. So what you're doing here is you're physically poking and digging your fingers in and activating this area around the ischium, the two little, you know, sit bones, those bony landmarks at the bottom of the pelvis. And we're getting the lower glutes activated here because also so often, again, that low back can be so used to being in that shortened position, the glutes can be so sleepy that we'll just kind of automatically go into them. But we want to get some activation, some lengthening of the hamstrings and some waking up around those lower glutes. So you're probably feeling pretty fired up in your glutes at this point. We're going to finish it up here, bringing our palms back onto those bony frontal hip points, pressing into your feet, lift and lower your hips a few times. So it's really small here. We're pressing our hands back onto those ASISs. They're acting as a little bit of resistance and our glutes are firing up against them. Now this might have already all felt way too intense, in which case just keep coming into that low bridge, holding it for as long as you can, breathing, coming down, and then coming back up into it. We need to start to wake up those glutes and build their endurance like we're doing here. So keep pulsing, lifting and lowering. Again, low bridge is superior to high bridge, especially if you're just trying to activate your glutes and work on the extension of the hips. So those hips getting longer at the front of the hip creases, that tailbone rooting towards the heels. And then hold your hips here. Feel like your feet could dial outward to the right and to the left. So the glutes are super fired up here. And again, this is all to serve lengthening and strengthening and giving support to that low back, and then lower all the way down. Now go slow from the upper spine, the middle spine, and into the lower spine until that sacrum comes back down. So glutes are nice and active here. We're gonna keep some activity in the glutes here. Wiggle your feet nice and wide. We're gonna do a little hip release here. Drop the knees off to the right. So the knees will drop off to the right, and you'll take your left hand onto the right glute, right hand on top of that left frontal hip point. Squeeze the left glute. So use the hand there to make sure the muscles are working, and then press into the heel of the left foot. My feet are wide, so I can give myself lots of space in the hips here. Root your tailbone again, point it towards the heels of the feet, so that low back's getting longer. And just like we just did in bridge, we're helping to uncork the hip by pressing with the left glute and freeing that space. Then come back through center, take it the other way. So again, right glute is ready to fire here. You take that right hand to that right glute, just kind of lift up into it, and then press into your right heel. So the heel of the foot is what's going to cue that glute to fire, and then point your tailbone towards the two heels here. So the low back is staying long, and we're getting more of the rotation around the actual like ribs here. Another breath in here. And exhale. And we'll bring our legs back through center. Just a quick little core series. Again, when the abdominals are supporting us properly and firing well, then we can really bring a lot of relief into our low back. So tie your fingers together. This will be a really quick core series. We're just going to do 4 of these. You can do more if you want. Inhale. Exhale, draw your belly in and just lift your shoulder blades off of the ground. Your feet are still on the floor, kind of like they were in that bridge. Your sacrum still on the ground. Still honor the curve of the low back and just get those scapula and the skull off the ground. Inhale and lower. Exhale and lift. So draw it in. Try to pause, but if you need little breaths in here, like through the ribs, feel free to do that. We're holding these a little bit longer, again, to up the endurance levels of our abdominals. Inhale and lower. We want them to be able to work when we want them to work. Exhale and lift. Everything gathers together. We're adding a small thing here. So we're off the shoulder blades. Take a little twist to the left. It's literally just an inch that I want you to twist. Stay off your left shoulder blade. Really notice if you've kind of fallen onto it. Stay off that shoulder blade. Come back through center. Inhale and lower. Exhale and lift, everything draws together. Take a little twist to the right. So you take that little twist to the right, shoulder blade stays off of the ground, don't let it fall down, pull deeper into the belly, come back through center, inhale and lower. And draw the knees in. We'll get a little chest opening here. So it's sometimes if the upper core is restricted, the shoulders are rolled forward and all that stuff that comes from daily life, then it might be hard for that low back to truly find its release. So you're gonna pull your knees in really close to keep the low back long. As you drop your knees off to the right side here, your low back will stay long. So the knees stay pretty close to like your chest as opposed to down by your hips. Just reach your right arm out here and you can stack your left arm directly on top of it. All right. Sorry, trying the pods out for the first time, lost one. So that left hand on top of that right, we're gonna reach that left arm up, over, around, and down. And like a clock stroke here, it's going up, overhead. You can bend the elbow or lift the fingertips off of the floor. Dragging them along the floor is too much opening for that shoulder. Just one more time around. Keep the low back long, so that's why those knees are in close. And then bring it back through center, knees pull into the middle, and you'll drop it over to the left. Keep the knees close towards your chest. Right hand stacks on top of that left, and let your left knee come over to the left shoulder. And you'll go ahead and reach that right arm up, around, overhead, like a big clock stroke here, taking it up, around, overhead, either dragging the fingers along the floor, bending the elbow, or letting the fingers lift. And then one more time, so it feels pretty even with that first side. And then we'll bring our knees back through center. Come around onto your hands and knees real quick, and we'll still continue to free up the back here with a few cat-cows. So again, using strength and engagement as a way to ultimately free the body. It's like really all these muscles are attached to each other through their attachments on the bones, all this stuff. It's all connected. So if we need something to relax and to release, then something is going to have to engage and strengthen in order to send that signal for it to release. And that's what we're doing for the low back by getting into all this good core, glutes, and shoulder stabilization. We're firing up all the areas that share connections with the low back so that the low back and its little like stuck working connections don't have to get stuck there. They can get the support that they need to allow the release. But anyway, we're coming on to our quadruped. Hands are underneath the shoulders here. Your knees can either be like under the hips or a little bit closer in. Sometimes it's even better to get length into the spine. Now, I know you don't have the floor helping you out here anymore, but still keep that awareness in the body of the triple S, the skull, the scapula, and the sacrum, all aligned. You're gonna go ahead, push into your hands and just allow that to feel the lift in the chest. We're not rounding the back or anything, but we're actually gonna look at the left hand and the right hand and feel like you could dial your left hand outward towards the left. So it's like coming towards the pinky edge. The energy is coming out towards the pinky edge side of the hand, and the right hand, feel like you could dial it out to the right. The wrists are still lined up with the short edges at the top of the mat. What this is doing here, hopefully, is creating this sense of energy, this corkscrew feeling through the elbow and up into the shoulder blade, hugging those onto the back ribs. Now check your neck and just notice if the skull kind of got away from the shoulders. Think of lifting your head, but not lifting your chin. And then also lift the belly button up towards the low back. It's okay if it doesn't feel like it lifted very much, but energetically, you should feel a big shift in how the energy is holding itself, even if there's not much movement. Just a little squeeze of your glutes here. Nothing super aggressive. Let's just turn them on like 20%. After you've been working on like 100%, 20%, easy to access. That's why we're doing it, to get that full range of that engagement. And now your hands won't actually move, but we're gonna start to open up this back area with a few cat-cows. So feel like your hands could pull back towards those legs and then pull your chest open, slightly lifting the tailbone. Don't let your guts just go falling to the ground, but still feel that lift of your belly coming into the low back. Again, support the low back by keeping the core strong. Then push into the hands. Come back through center, point your tailbone down towards your heels and really round your upper back. You can bring your head down. And again, inhale, come back through that opening of the chest. So keep the belly button lifting into the low back, but feel like the hands are gonna pull back to the legs and feel like the collarbone, that big bone in the front of the chest, is getting wider. Pushing the hands, spread the shoulder blades, feel that spacing out. Pull with the hands, open up the chest, belly button lifts into the low back. Pushing the hands, we'll do this like 3 more times. You can go a little slower or even quicker. And really, as you pull forward, hold that belly steady, really feel the chest is getting broadened. As you push into the hands, root your tailbone, space that out. Let's take one more. And on this last one, we'll hold that like cat rounding position. Point your tailbone towards the ground. Round those upper shoulders, spread the space between them. Hold that belly in strong. You can even come up onto your fingertips. That can really get you some space in that low back. Let's take one breath here. And then come back into that centered position. We're gonna come back down onto our back. This is the bridge class. And come close enough to a wall that you can get your feet onto it. So we want to be able to get our feet onto the wall just close enough that we'll have a 90-degree bend just about in the knees and the hips here. So here's the last bridge that we're going to take today. And this one is really nice when that low back is being cranky, but it's again really helpful to first come to a place of activation and strength, and then work on releasing once you have those muscles that are sharing the attachments with the low back active and ready to fire. Clear signaling. We'll bring our hands back onto our thighs. And so again, you have your triple S to start it off here, your sacrum, your scapula, your skull, all in line. Honor those natural curves of the low back, the neck here, so the chin's not overly lifted. And then push into your thighs, push into the feet on the wall, and root your tailbone towards your heels. So again, you're getting a lift. You might find you're a little bit higher up than you're able to get on the floor. That's usually pretty typical. Your glutes are still working here. So again, you might be alone doing this. So don't be afraid to give them a little pat and a slap, activate them. And then you can bring your hands back on top of the thighs just to continue to encourage this uncorking of the hips. And again, if being up high feels really intense, come a little bit lower. But the hands on the feet on the wall is really going to help get you a little extra elevation, a little more space for those glutes. I think it helps to lift the hips up and is a little bit less demand for those glutes, but at the same time, they're still working. And then again, still use that traction of your palms, pressing into the tops of your thighs to like lightly kind of drag them up towards the knees. They might even physically do that a couple of times. You might give yourself like a little rolling the wrists up from the hips to the knee massage. And so you might decide to stay here maybe for another minute or so, but one more time with the core on, I'm gonna have you lower down, upper, middle, and lower back, just nice and segmentally here. We'll close out the practice by pulling our knees in and just circling our legs in those hip sockets. You could either hold on to them or kind of lightly pass them from hand to hand, letting them circle a little bit more on their own power. You go the other way a few times too. Again, feel free to add on the reps. You could always do more of what we've done or hold it for more breaths. We'll say a lot of times when we're doing these, or even really any kind of stretch after about 2 minutes or so, there's not a whole lot more that is going to be happening in that muscle. And so then you can bring your feet on down. Now to finish off, just releasing your low back, I'll wiggle away from the wall to show this a little bit better. You can still keep the feet in close. So here's an option. If you ever come to a yoga class and you're in Shavasana, you don't have to actually extend your legs out. A lot of people, it's so tight back there in the legs that if we do that, it can lift the low back up. So just notice if that's your case. It happens to me, especially if I'm not warmed up or anything like that. It's like my first class of the day or something like that. So just keeping those feet in is a really great way to maintain your triple S. Now you can also, if this feels like kind of still too active, wiggle your feet really wide. They'll probably go off mat. Then turn your toes like in towards each other. The knees drop in towards each other, and you point your tailbone towards the heels. And then just let your arms either rest by your side. They could come behind your head, more like a beach relaxing pose. Or you could do what's always really nice, one hand over the heart and one hand over the stomach here. But again, you're just rooting your tailbone and you're allowing that internal rotation to bring a little release into the low back area. Probably feel it maybe around the hips too, and the muscles that again are sharing connections to the low back. So whether you're laying in full Shavasana or the feet are walked in and you have those knees dropped in towards each other, we'll finish this class just with a big breath into the nose. Fill it all the way up, and when you're ready, you can let it out to the mouth and breathe it down into the low back. The feet are wide. You might want to wiggle them in together. when you're ready to come up, and you can always stay there for longer, you can bring the knees in, rock over to one side, and use your top arm to very gently bring yourself up into a comfortable seated position. And hopefully you can find that with that space in the low back. Comfortable seated position can really mean anything. You know, we don't have to have those legs crossed. If just sitting upright feels good for you, then take that. If it's comfortable and dignified, then I say that's practicing yoga. And so the light in me honors the light that shines in each and every one of you. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to do this reset and to retune. Namaskar, everybody.